Okay, Blue Onion people, this video is for you. I've been teaching this class at the Old Country Store, and at the last two classes, students asked for a refresher video just to help them remember the process. It's a really easy quilt pattern, but it's just important to remember the steps, and just to see like a quick refresher should be helpful to those of you that are still working on your quilts. I know some of you powered through them, and I think some of you already have yours quilted, but for those of you that are still working on yours, this is meant to be a refresher. Of course, it doesn't take place of the class because not all the material is going to be covered here, but hopefully it's enough to remind you of what we covered in class. And if you're watching this and you did not take the class with me, this is a pattern called Blue Onion by Saginaw Street Quilts. And so if you buy that pattern, it has all the information that you need to cut your blocks and assemble them. Now, you don't have to use the Creative Grids ruler that the instructions give. You can also do a hand-cut version, but in our class, we used the Creative Grids ruler and found that that worked out great. Okay, so first of all, you have your stack of 6 fabrics, and the pattern will tell you what size that rectangle needs to be for you to cut those out. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that your fabrics, as you lay them next to each other, that they all look good next to each other. And then keep in mind that that final fabric on the bottom of the pile, that it is going to be next to the fabric on the top of the pile at some point. So make sure there's a little bit of a contrast between all of those. Okay, so now I'm having trouble. I cannot get my camera any higher than this, so I'm going to try to make sure that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, and get this all in the frame, but this is as high as my tripod here will go. Okay, so what we want to do now is we have our stack of 6 fabrics. They're all right sides up, and the first thing we want to do is we want to cut the corner off the top right corner. And what we're doing is we're positioning this rectangle of fabric so it's running lengthwise this way, the shorter part is this way. And that's pretty critical. If you have it oriented this way and you cut the right corner off, it's not going to be, your orientation is going to be wrong. So orient it so that it's longer this way than this way. And now we're going to just take a little bit of a corner off. Let me pull this down so you can see. We're going to just take a little corner off, and that's just a way to tell where our, so we always know where we have our block oriented. Okay, so I'm just simply cutting that off, okay, and discarding that. Now, our first cut is going to be right sides up. I'm going to slide this up so you can see a little bit. Okay, and we're also going to position, we're using the B-lines the whole way through this project. So what I did was, remember we put those arrows on the B line up here, and then down here on the right, we put that arrow there so you can quickly see where it is. And then also I put that little post-it note on the B corner so that it's real easy to see that first cut and get it lined up. So I'm gonna put that post-it note in the corner, make sure that this is lined up on the B line across here and along here. And then I'm gonna make my first cut. And let me slide this up so you can see the numbers. Okay, so the first cut I'm doing at the 4, okay? And again, I'm using just a regular rotary cutter. You don't need anything, you don't need one of those little tiny ones. A regular 45mm rotary cutter works just great. Just make sure your blade is nice and sharp because we're cutting through 6 layers. All right, so and the other thing is I had a student that kept tilting her rotary cutter. And so you just want to make sure that your blade is perpendicular to the mat, and it cuts through beautifully. Okay, so go ahead and make your first cut at 4. All right, and again, this little cheat sheet it said that we need to cut, flip, and then trim. Okay, so I'm going to lift my ruler. I'm going to pull this part away. I did the cutting on that, and now I'm going to flip the stack. I'm going to flip it so that the corner is always in my upper right hand corner. All right, and now I'm going to do my second, then the next step is to trim, and we're always going to be trimming a 1/2 inch off. And so I'm just going to go ahead and use my ruler here, this Creative Grids ruler. This 1/2 inch, this first dotted line is a 1/2 inch mark, so I will just use that to do my cut. So I'm going to take a 1/2 inch off there, and I'm going to just slide my fabric around just to make it easy for me to be able to position my ruler and cut off the half off the bottom. Okay, so all these cuts that I'm making are always on the two sides where the arc was already cut, and it's never on the side where we cut that triangle, because you would lose the triangle as you go and you'd lose your sense of where you need to be. Okay, so I did a cut, I flipped it, I trimmed it, so now I'm gonna cut. Okay, my second cut is gonna be at the 5.5 inch line. So now I don't look anymore at this corner, but instead I'm simply looking at the two B lines. It's simply lining up those two B lines along here and along here, and then I'm gonna make my next cut, and again, the cut is at 5.5. Now, one way to tell that it's easy to get mixed up, and sometimes it's hard to remember, did I flip? Oops, I don't even have that right there. Okay, did I flip? If you didn't flip, your arc on the ruler would match the arc on your fabric, and you can see it's a different arc. The ruler has an arc going this way, the fabric has a different arc. So I know I'm good. Okay, so I have it at the B lines, and then I'm gonna cut at the 5.5. Okay, so lift my ruler, pull that piece away that I cut. I'm gonna put it right side up, and I'm gonna set it aside over here, and then we'll use it here in a bit. Okay, so I made my cut. Now I need to flip. Again, corner is always in the right, top right. And now I'm gonna do my trimming. So again, I'm just using this ruler to do my trimming. If it's easier, just grab one of your longer rulers, and that works out fine, but I didn't even remember to bring my long ruler to the table here to set this up, so we'll just use that, make that work. Okay, so now I trimmed. All right, so my next step is now to cut. Okay, so my third cut is gonna be at the 7. So again, I'm lining up the B lines, and here's my 7, number 7. And again, I'm looking at these numbers at the white, which you can barely see that here. Right along I'm looking at the white circles. Okay, so number 7. All right, I'll pull this aside. All right, so now I need to flip. I'm gonna trim again. Trim this corner off, or I'm sorry, this side off. Again, never cut, you never wanna cut at that corner. All right, so I did my trimming. Okay, now I'm gonna do my last cut, and my last cut is at the 8.5 inch line, or circle, okay? So have that lined up at the B lines, cut at the 8.5. Pull, I'm gonna flip this back over, set it aside. All right, now we still need to, even though we've done our last cut, we still have to flip and we still trim. This is, I think so many of, it's so easy to forget this last step, and we had we found that out in class, that was just an easy thing to overlook. All right, and we'll do that one last trim here. All right, so now we have our stack here. Okay, so, and I always like to encourage people to have one of these mini design boards. So what it is, it's foam core board covered with batting. They're really handy to lay your blocks out. And for those of you who've taken class with me, I almost always, that's one of the supplies I often encourage you to bring. It's really, really nice for laying these blocks out. And then, you know, in between when you're working on them, you can just stack them up and put them aside. Okay, so let me show you now the next step. Again, this is a stack of 6. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take, we need to shuffle our fabrics so that we have blocks that look, that all the fabrics are represented. So what we'll do with the first piece, we're gonna take one piece and move it to the bottom. All right, on the second one, we'll take the top 2, move it to the bottom. The next one will take the top 3, moving them to the bottom. Oops, I didn't count that right. What did I do wrong here? 1, 2, did I not do this one? Wait, let me just back up here and just make sure we get this right. Okay, so that one was here. We took 2 to the bottom, that's right. I just didn't take 3 to the bottom. Okay, so 3 to the bottom on this one. I must have only counted 2. Okay, now let's take 4 to the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the last one, we'll take 5 to the bottom, or you can bring 1 to the top, which it's the same thing. Okay, so we'll just bring 1 up to the top here, and this is what your block is going to look like when you sew it together. So again, I wanted to make sure that, you know, my fabrics, there was enough contrast so that I could notice, so you could see the design take place. Okay, then I'll walk you through how, just a quick refresher on how you stitch your blocks together. I'm not going to demonstrate that part here, but what we'll do now is, my favorite way to do it is, and this is what we did in class, is I take the piece that I'm going to sew together and fold it and just kind of walk that curve, and then find, you can either finger crease it to find the center, or you can use your iron and just press a little crease right there in that part. And then take the next one that you're going to sew it to, which is this piece that we're going to use. And maybe it's easier if I pull this up and have this kind of as our background so that you're not confused looking at those others. Okay, so we're going to sew these 2 together, so I'm going to do the same thing. Just make sure I'm putting this curve and this curve together. I'm not putting this seam to this one. It won't fit. You'll know right away that something's wrong. So then I'll simply take it, again, walk that curve a little bit, crease it, and then I like to use this Roxanne's glue-based, and I like it in this applicator. And then what I do is I put a little dot of glue right on the crease and put this other crease, match it up, and then use your iron to heat set it real quickly. I'm not going to do that right now, so I will just stick a pin in there. And then the other 2 pins is you'll put your match your sides up together and put a pin in, and this is just enough to get you started. And then you're going to do the same thing on this one, is you'll put line your sides up and put a pin there. And then you're going to be sewing a 1/4 inch seam. Now, the directions tell you to do a scant quarter. I just can never get a scant quarter on a curve that easily, so I just did a 1/4 inch seam, and as a result, I needed to trim my blocks slightly smaller. So do whatever's easiest for you. It doesn't matter, because you're going to be trimming your blocks down. So then, once you get all your seams stitched, you're going to end up with a block that looks like this. Okay, and you can see right away that it needs trim because it's a little wonky across here, and that's perfectly normal because that's what happens when you sew something with a curve. I always like to, I press my seams as I go, pressing them to the corner, and then I like to take a little bit of best press, and I usually use my best press. I dilute it 50% water and 50% best press, put it in one of those mister bottles. And then I like to give it a really good press so it's nice and flat, and you've got all the wonkiness out, all the, the distortion out. And then the last step is you are going to trim your squares down. Now if you have a 10.5 inch ruler, you can use that. I lost my 10.5 inch ruler, so I am just using as long as you have a ruler that's bigger than this, you can make that work. So like I said, I'm gonna trim mine to 10.25. So all I need to do is I want to bring it as close to the corner as I possibly can, because I don't want to lose much of the corner. I don't mind losing this part as much. So this block I actually probably could have done 10.5, but it's really, really close. And I know that what will happen is that I will probably have some blocks that I couldn't do at 10.5. So I'm going to just do them all at 10.25. So I'm going to bring that 10.25 inch line down to the corner here, make sure I have enough to trim the whole way across here, the whole way across here. And then what I'll do is I'll trim these two sides, then I'll rotate my block and then trim the other two sides at 10¼ inches. If you can do 10½ and you have a 10½ inch ruler, that's the easiest way to go about doing it. Okay, I think that's everything that we covered in class. Yeah, I'm eager to see your pictures of your finished quilts, so be sure to send those to me then. All right, thanks guys. Sorry that the lighting isn't so great, but there's just not a whole lot you can do on a cloudy day. All right, enjoy your blocks. And again, for those of you who have, if this is new, this is the Blue Onion Quilt pattern by Saginaw Street Quilts. All right, thanks guys.